The day the pioneer mother was taken to the mental hospital. It was early morning when the decision became final. The family had fought against it for as long as they could, but the breaking point had come. Maybe she had attacked one of the children in a fit of rage, or maybe she had stopped speaking, staring at the wall for days. Perhaps she had wandered barefoot into the fields at night, convinced she was following a voice only she could hear. Whatever the final straw was, the husband had made up his mind. She had to go. The husband had sent word days before, either through a long ride into town or passing a message to a neighbor who could contact the authorities. The closest mental hospital was far away, perhaps in a distant city, meaning the county sheriff or a hired man from the institution would come to take her. The process of commitment had not been easy. He had to secure testimonies, often from reluctant neighbors or a local doctor, stating that his wife was a danger to herself or the family. The shame of the ordeal weighed heavily on him, but the practical reality was worse. He couldn't keep the farm running, protect the children, and care for a woman who was lost in her own mind. Inside the small wooden house, the children knew something was wrong. Their father was tense and pacing. Perhaps he had told them what was happening, or maybe he had avoided the conversation altogether, knowing that they wouldn't fully understand. The older children did, though. A teenage daughter, who had been doing most of her mother's work for months, quietly packed a few of her mother's belongings: a tin hairbrush, a small Bible, and a few other little items here and there. The youngest children clung to each other, too scared to speak. The mother's condition that morning depended on how far her illness had progressed. If she was in a catatonic state, she might have been eerily calm, staring vacantly at the floor, barely reacting as her family moved around her. If she was in the midst of a manic or paranoid episode, she might have resisted violently, screaming accusations or pleading desperately with her husband not to send her away. If she was aware of what was happening, she might have broken down, weeping, sobbing, and begging to stay, promising that she would get better. The children's presence might have made it worse. She might have clung to them, refusing to let go, making the heartbreak even more unbearable. When the authorities finally arrived, the sound of hooves and wheels breaking the morning stillness sent a wave of dread through the house. The sheriff, perhaps accompanied by a deputy or a hired mental institution attendant, stepped down stiffly, hat in hand, not meeting the husband's eyes. They had done this before, and it was never easy. If the mother was calm, they would try to speak gently, coaxing her outside, telling her it was just a short trip to see a doctor. But if she resisted, if she screamed, fought, or even tried to run, they would have to restrain her. The sight of two grown men wrestling their mother into submission would have burned into the children's minds forever. The youngest might be crying, reaching out for her, while the older one stood frozen, helpless, their father holding them back. Perhaps she cursed her husband, screaming that he was betraying her. Perhaps she sobbed into his chest, begging him to change his mind. Either way, it was too late. The papers were signed, the decision had been made. Once she was in the wagon, restrained if necessary, the reality set in. The father stood stiffly, arms crossed, his face unreadable, but inside he was breaking. He had lost his wife, though she had been slipping away for years. The children, if they were allowed near her, might have whispered final goodbyes, or perhaps they were too afraid to approach. The wagon rolled away, dust kicking up in its wake. The mother might have looked back, with her face twisted in grief, or she might have already disappeared inside herself, unaware of where she was going. As the wagon disappeared over the horizon, the family turned back toward the house. The home felt different now, emptier, heavier. The father immediately went back to work. The children, stunned and grieving, went about their chores. No one spoke much that day. They didn't know if they would ever see their mother again.